Hello and welcome to our new CoatsCast series, Where Next? The Past, Present and Future of Denim. Today you're tuned in for our final episode, Denim Evolution. But before we get started and I hand you over to our host, Mawson, I want to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. We'll be sending you a recording via email after the broadcast has finished, so please don't worry if you miss something. You can always go back and revisit the session afterwards. If you do have any questions for our panelists today, and we really do hope that you do, please feel free to submit them by using the questions pane in your GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We're going to collate these during the discussion and go through as many as possible in our allotted Q&A time at the end of the session. Finally, we do have a couple of handouts for you to download today. Again, these can be found in your GoToWebinar control panel. And without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to our host, Mawson. Over to you, Mawson.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for the lovely introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Mawson. I'm a denim light designer. I've been a denim designer for close to 20 years, and I spent a lot of my career looking at ways to reduce waste, but also clever pattern cutting to really advanced sewing as well. I've been a believer from the very beginning. I've always hated cheap ways of sort of manufacturing, even down to not using an overlocker. You know, from the actual beginning of my career, and ever since I've been a tutor at many different colleges. I've taught a lot of amazing students as well. The same philosophy that I had when I was a student, of just making things extremely well and trying not to do cheap production. But today we're going to be talking a lot about the future ways of how we manufacture garments, and especially when it comes to denim. And we've got some amazing guests again here today. Today we've got a free guest joining us. We've got Danielle Elsner from Decode, amazing young designer who only graduated from her MA a few years ago, but has made some amazing waves in the industry in both jersey, denim, and multi-product garments, and that's going to be exciting to hear her journey. We've got Stuart McGreedy Scott. He's actually a director of Coats Digital, and we've got Halil Dima, the regional technical services director at Coats, and the Coats in-house denim specialist. This is going to be quite an interesting discussion, and obviously we've got planned for about 45 minutes or so to talk, and it might end up being a bit longer. Let's start straight with Danielle, and it'd be great to hear your personal journey, Danielle. So please take it away.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I believe Sarah's going to share a little document to go along as I'm speaking. But as Mawson said, my name is Danielle Elsner, and I'm a zero waste systems designer. I've been practicing zero waste design for over 10 years now. And I've really dedicated my life's work to solving fashion industry problems through communication, sharing, and play. I really love puzzle solving and complex problems, so this is truly my perfect niche. I recently graduated from the Royal College of Art in London, where I met Mawson. I graduated this past summer during lockdown, but while I was at RCA, as I said, I met Mawson there, and I was one of the students who received his denim sponsorship, which was absolutely amazing. I just want to talk a little bit about what zero waste design actually means in the lens that I use it. It's the practice of designing patterns to use every inch of fabric in the creation of a garment or object. Zero waste design really demands more of a holistic approach than conventional design practices, where roles are really siloed. The design, pattern making, and optimization of fabric usage is all integrated into one complete process, and it demands more of a designer, but it ends up making a much better outcome in environmental and social responsibility. Though my lens is fashion, of course, these concepts can be used across every single industry, and it's really interesting to talk with people outside of fashion of what they can take away from it as well. I personally love making zero waste garments that look as close to standard garments as possible, so that zero waste design doesn't come across as big boxy eco chic kind of things that it has been known to be in the past. And I really enjoy using little details to call out the zero waste nature of a garment, or color or graphics, or kind of those little nods. These are just some of the images from the denim collection I created with Mawson, so nice little nod to our history there. After RCA, I moved back to Portland, where I am coming at you from right now. I set up a little design studio and consultancy, and I do a lot of work with brands and educational institutions to educate around this idea of zero waste design and what that actually means in a larger context in the industry. And I try to give better insight into the problems and solutions of, the real life application of this great far out there future idea. So going down to the next slide, as many of you already know, the fashion industry is one of the most polluting industries in the world, and all of that. The figures are actually way worse than we standardly talk about. You know, there's this idea that an average of 15% of fabric is wasted at the cutting stage, but actually it's quite a lot more, especially when you go into luxury side of things or stripe matching or pattern matching, and it can be all the way up to 40% of fabric wasted, which is absolutely insane. I'm just going to talk briefly about how zero waste design is not a new idea by any means. These are some examples of zero waste design from history. You know, historically, it was recognized that wasting cloth was an absolutely ludicrous idea. Before the Industrial Revolution, making clothes was an incredibly time-consuming process, and every part of the cloth was valued because it took so much time to actually make it. Therefore, designs reflected that value of the material. So whether it was the whole animal hide being used or simply making cuts in a fabric and wrapping it around the body with pleats and draping, the use of the whole cloth was like absolutely paramount. In the last few years, I've kind of tried to distill what zero waste design principles actually mean outside of just a pattern cutting lens, because in today's world, we have to look at the bigger picture of, you know, we are saving materials, but we're also saving time by making our processes more efficient, using better sampling, using better tools, and then saving energy by, you know, mental energy by embracing the change. I think that's the biggest struggle that a lot of people have. But then also using the resources that we already have with, you know, recycling and solar energy, and doing all of this combined with zero waste principles really makes for the best product. Here's just a quick example of what I mean by zero waste design pattern layout, where you have a traditional t-shirt. The blue behind shows all the waste that would be cut off traditionally. And on the right, we have one of my zero waste tees that I designed a few years ago that uses every inch of fabric, 0% waste, and it's a bit smaller impact than it would have been as a traditional garment. One of the biggest challenges of going to a zero waste design model is going from this linear to circular strategy, adjusting team strategies of working with other people so that you're more than one arm of the business. Really changes how everyone works together. You know, how do you quantify your role if you're a designer and a pattern maker and a grader? You know, how do you define what that role is? How do you define what your job actually is? And how do you interact with other people in this kind of way? One of the co-founders of our collective Zero Waste Design Online, I think some of you guys are here in the audience, which is awesome. Holly McKillen created these 5 conditions for success for a zero waste project to work in a production setting, basically. And I won't go too deep into all of these because I know we're short on time, but it really comes down to, you know, what is the motivation of why you're wanting to do zero waste design? Is it money, marketability? Is it ethics? Is it actually wanting to do better for the planet? You know, do you have the proper time allocated to do this? Because the development process does take quite longer at the forefront. But once you actually nail that process, it ends up being the same amount of time in actual production, and it's kind of the same as doing a standard product, but that initial research and development time takes a bit longer. And then, you know, you need people with prior knowledge of how zero waste design works and how the industry works. You have to have a flexible hierarchy and process within the company of being able to ask the right questions to the right people. And lastly, you need to have buy-in from every level of the company, or else it gets squashed at some point along the way to a consumer-facing product. So that's me, and that's zero waste design in a very, very small nutshell. Pass it back to Mohsen, and we can go over all the other great things that we have to talk about today. Feel free to add in any questions in as we go along.
Wow, thank you so much. You know what it is I remember seeing your work many years ago. I actually pick about 2 or 3 designers each year for sponsorship from like Kaihara denim mills in like Japan, and like Danielle was an obvious like contender for this sponsorship, and obviously she got it, and then the collection that she made, she ended up winning the like Evian like design award based on it, which is an amazing thing as well. So more success to what you're doing, like Danielle. And it's amazing that, you know, you're right, these systems of working, they're not new. We were, you know, I think the earliest known mummified garment of a pant that they found was a zero waste garment. So it's amazing that, you know, there's evidence of it, and there's evidence even only going back 200 to 200 or even like 150 years ago that we were designing in this way. And it's mostly down to manufacturing and making things faster and cheaper that's led to us actually cutting things more quicker and not even caring about the waste. And we've obviously invented a whole industries to collect that waste and to recycle it back into fiber and yarn again. and to spin it, which is like ridiculous, really. So very, very interesting. So Halil, you know, the things that Coats are doing, of course, it'd be interesting to hear your perspective, especially what Danielle's shown us. I'm sure there's aspects within Coats that you're working also maybe with not with that zero waste philosophy, but there's definitely ways to enhance or definitely to try and like reduce waste in what you're doing. Can you like sort of tell us more about what Coats are actually doing?
Yes, Musin. Hello to everybody again, by the way. Actually, when we think about the all garment, all the denim garment, and the fabric part is a big part of the total garment, and zero waste or reduced waste approach is very important in the fabric side. And Daniela made a great summary for patterning, especially, and Stuart will mention about it, I think. That's why I will focus on the other processes into the denim, into the industry. When we think about the sewing lines and when we think about the washing part, as we guess, there's huge waste in every process. For example, when we focus on the stitching line, stitching and seams are very important in the denim because we are cutting the small parts of fabrics and we are gathering them by using stitches, and it gives us strength and sometimes elongation and decorative look. And in the production unit, uh, when we used cheap quality and low quality sewing accessorizes into the threads or other accessorizes, and it can cause lots of uh, breakages, thread breakages during the line. And all of these cause reducing the production, the number of the garments at the end of the day. And all of these, when we think about all of these, it is time consuming and it is laboring consuming. And there is also an opportunity for producing extra garments. And so we are offering to our especially manufacturer customers um, some coarse span threads instead of staple span polyester usage. Because when we think about the whole industry, staple span polyester usage are still high in some countries, especially in Asia side. And when we measure it, the differences, how is reducing the waste? When we use staple span polyester threads and converting it to the coarse span threads, the thread breakage rate is reducing 85%. And it is increasing the production productivity 18%, huge amount numbers. And after the sewing, you know that when we see some faults, problems onto the sea, this means that we need to repair all of them. Skip stitch problem, thread breakage problem. In every repairment, um, brings us extra time, extra laboring, consuming. And when we focus on the washing side, you know that the nature of denim has many harsh washes such as bleaching, stone wash, scrubbing, and all of these washings are damaging the fabric and are damaging the stitch. And there are also huge seam cracking problems and fabric damage problem. And these can cause second quality garments because we cannot repair, by the way, every garment after these problems. We can repair some of them. And in repairing, we are using extra material and we are using extra time and laboring as well. And in the second quality garment side, we are losing the opportunity in terms of the money. And all of these are so important. And in the washing side, and we can see some sustainable washes instead of traditional washings, because we have seen that all traditional washes, most of them are causing big repairs, big wastages, but in sustainable washes, lasering and ozone and e-flow, and there are some enzyme-based, bio-based enzymes usages still available, and all of these can cause less wastage. And into the productivity side, we are offering some special sewing threads as well to the customers. For example, it is very simple case into the denim industry. After 2012, you know that the stretch fabrics got trendy, and now still we are using stretch fabrics more. And stretch fabrics means that if you have some dummy blowout process into the washing side, you will have lots of thread breakages. And we measured it. Sometimes we could have 40% thread breakage in back pocket stitches. For example,
Wow.
we are offering some spatial threads. Our customers are using these threads only in these areas, very small consumption onto the total garments. Only they are using as bottom thread, but their productivity, their thread breakage level is reducing 5%. Sometimes, if you set the tensions very good, 0%. And all of these are very crucial in terms of productivity. And productivity means that for us, reduced waste. It is very suitable for reduced waste logic. And I think we need to increase our right first time into our production site, denim site, in order to have zero waste cycle philosophy.
I think it's really interesting that you're saying that, you know, the current model that we've got now, it could be 20, 30% overproduction, knowing that there's going to be thread breakages or mistakes in when their garments are being made. And obviously, with a combination of just knowing about the different kinds of thread options that are available. And obviously, some factories, they go ahead and they find out all of this new types of threads that are better for the back pocket stitch or anything that's going to be elasticated. They obviously make sure that this type of thread is used in that production. But it's very interesting to see. But obviously, with a combination of zero waste as well. And I know zero waste at the moment, I'm sure that Danielle will jump in straight after, and we're going to come to you, Stuart, very, very soon. But, you know, zero waste, and that's the thing, every single pattern that Danielle does, and any zero waste designer does, every fabric is a slightly different width. It's not always the same. So if you've got a pattern that's perfect for one fabric, then when you get a different fabric in, it might be 1 or 2 inches more wider or shorter. You'd have to readjust that pattern again. So obviously, they are algorithms, but they're not perfect yet. And you know, I found that even Danielle will tell us more. It's still got a human touch to it, you know, at the moment. But moving on to Stuart now, what's Coats Digital doing in regards to like the whole zero waste philosophy and the new ways of working and taking the company future bound and making sure that sort of like you guys are more future proof. So when these newer technologies are available, which they're available to us now, but when they're coming through, what kind of things is Coats doing to like support their customer base?
So I think this is a really interesting topic, and I think zero waste or waste reduction in general is really hot. You know, as you said, it's nothing new. However, I do think it's really hot on, you know, and it's really key to most brands that we're working with momentarily. I think there's a key distinction here that we need to recognize. One is zero waste design. The zero waste design concept has a lot of perceptions that brands really believe compromises the way that brands feel, fit, shape, what the consumer is really trying to achieve from the garments will be compromised if we go down a zero waste design route. The other is a way of reducing waste using the traditional methodology of design, but actually using technology to reduce the way that we waste, whether that's through the fabric consumption piece, whether that's through the productivity piece, all of these things that we can do to make sure that we're planning better, we're planning to produce more. You know, if we can make sure that everything we do in a manufacturing environment produces the optimal productivity, the biggest output it can, that's a great way of reducing waste. If when we're consuming that fabric, we can make sure we could consuming it optimally, that's one way of reducing waste. And that's not changing. That's a very different concept to designing with the zero waste concept in mind. And Danielle, this is something that I know you and I have spoken about previously, but certainly from my perspective, one of the things that I would love to hear is, you know, are these perceptions right? If we do go down a zero waste design methodology, are we really having to compromise the way that brands are designing today? Are there certain product categories that we can focus on? It's things that certainly that in my mind come to mind are things like maternity wear and children's wear. Actually, shape and fit is something that we need that flexibility. We want our garments to grow and shape with us as we change, etc. You know, are there certain things that brands we can certainly encourage brands to look at in terms of the types of garments that we're producing with this in mind? And actually, when I look at the manufacturing side of zero waste, certainly when we're designing with zero waste in mind, I think there's a very big perception that it actually is more time consuming. You know, it increases time to produce, which increases cost, reduces productivity, increases speed, you know, time to market. All of these things that actually create less flexibility and agility to be able to react to what the consumers want. I'd be really interested to hear your part in that. But certainly from our perspective, what we are focused on today is zero waste, long-term ideal, short-term practical steps that we can do to reduce waste today, and Coats Digital absolutely focus on working with brands to make sure that, and manufacturers to make sure that we are creating the most waste reduced environment that we're producing in as we can do using technology.
Yeah, so Stuart, you're absolutely correct that there's totally this conception that zero waste design is a lot, it reduces a lot of what you can actually do. And I like to say that you can actually make anything that you want zero waste. Like literally there's no product category that can't do it. And in terms of not being able to have the right fit or shape or style, it really, like when I start a new project with a company, it basically is you have to make your priority list. And if your main thing is fit, then we'll focus on fit and design everything around that. If your main thing is style and using this one particular fabric that is only this specific width, that is what we will design into. So I think it's really with zero waste design, you just have to make your priorities a lot more clear a lot earlier. And having this more holistic way of looking at things definitely changes how things are produced. On the side of actually making things, bringing things to market and the amount of time that you're saying can be added in, like I was saying earlier, there's definitely a lot longer lead times in actually making the product work at the beginning. But once it's all set up and ready to go, the actual production does not really change that much. There's an example that we had talked about before where I'm working with a company here in Portland to redesign one of their jackets. And with zero waste design methodology, I managed to save 13% of material, which ended up being $24 in just material costs alone. And all that needed to be added was one seam and one dart. So if you go into the analytics of like, you know, how much is an hourly wage for a seamstress and how long does that one seam and one dart take, you know, it doesn't counteract the effects of all the savings that comes from simply material alone. And when you're working with such like expensive material, it really makes a huge difference. The part where it gets difficult is when you're using cheap materials where the cost of just throwing away like 15% of that material is a lot cheaper than having a seamstress add in another seam to make it completely zero waste. And that's where a lot of zero waste designers end up hitting that frustration and where the kind of goals don't align necessarily. Because if you're using really cheap materials and trying to do the best you can with it, the material is still going to, you know, be ruined in a few years anyway, and you won't be able to keep it longevity wise. So yeah, there are so many different factors in that. And in terms of flexibility for production, I think it's companies are having a hard time being flexible because it's such a different way of working. And like, you know, it's kind of designing backwards and everyone has to be on board and you don't necessarily know what the outcome is until you get there. And it's a lot more trust. And that can be really difficult for starting a project like this. So if I missed anything along the way, there are quite a few points in there. So feel free to bring out anything else that I may have missed.
Oh, no, I've got one thing. It's quite interesting. It's like, you know, I always look at older ways of actually like constructing things. And one example is a one-piece fly that was invented in 1897 or somewhere around then. It was invented by the boss of the road, which is another denim company that became like defunct, and now Lee and VF actually own the patents. That's a whole different story altogether. But this way of doing a fly is one piece. If you look at a like traditional way of doing a button fly now, it's like two separate pieces. One's overlocked, one's square, sandwiched together, extremely messy like construction. But you go back 100 or so years earlier, there's a more elegant way of doing a fly, which is stronger, one piece, even simpler to do in like production. And when it came to doing my own production more than 10 years ago, in China and in like Japan, and I had to show them how to do this fly and sent them videos. And in the end, I went to the factory to show them, and they were really against it. They were really against it. This is not the way we do it. We only do the Levi's method from like 1947 onwards. We're not used to doing this. None of our workers like doing it this way. Within a few months of them learning it, they literally made sure every single garment in that factory coming out of it was done with a one piece fly. So it's just slight education, explaining people how this is slightly better than, you know, it's, even though I know it's a better way, but many people think, oh, but it's quicker and easier the older method because they know how to do it. That's true, but it's just slightly changing the mindset. And it's the same with zero waste as well. You know, it's slightly changing the mindset. The garment construction is virtually nearly the same. There might be an extra dart here for shape, or there might be a seam that's flipped or moved around. But you know, as Danielle said earlier, right at the beginning of her talk, was the idea is to try and make garments that don't look too dissimilar to a normal garment. Yes, any one of us, I've seen zero waste garments that look, you know, quite strange, and they have like circular pockets, and you know, they've used bits, you know, and that's cool. But the idea is that maybe they could have folded those away to make a more regular pocket or something. So it's interesting, very interesting. But there's lots of evidence of that, and I find it a lot in all the garments that I make. There's always hurdles along the way from the production side and the factory side, and yeah, it's just takes a little bit of everyone being on board. And as Daniel said, as like Danielle said, sometimes it's a pre-made garment to show them and the pattern, and then they go, oh, okay. And, you know, they do the maths and they figure out, actually we've saved 15% of our fabric. This makes more sense, you know. So it's just convincing people. Bringing back Khalil into the into the conversation. What sort of things is Coats doing to sort of like reduce waste as well as a company?
Actually, Mohsin, we are focusing on many things at the same time, because these subject is very deep subject, and that's why I want to mention about this subject from production side, from the plant side, and from the product side. For example, when we think about all of our plants, all our factories, and the first issue is water, because we are a sewing thread company, and we are dying, and we are using lots of water, and water is our first priority, and we have lots of targets about reducing the water consumption, and we are targeting 40% water reduction in our dye house. And so we are investing to reverse osmosis systems, and we are cleaning our water and using it again and again, and we are aiming to increase the water usage from the recleaning the water. For example, we can mention about the Twine investment. It is a very new investment. Twine is a startup company, and they are just like that, they are using a machine, and you are feeding the thread, and waterless dyeing it can do. And Coats did not acquire all the company, only invested maybe 10%. But for now, it is maybe not suitable for our bulk production, for our oil production. But the future is this. And you know that when we found something new, the development process and improvements are very easy in the modern technology. That's why Twine is a great example for us into the water consumption. And when we talk about the energy, and we are investing some renewable energy sources for our plants, and now we have some factories, and these factories are using solar energy sources for all the needs, factory needs. And new machine investments are very important, and if we want to buy a new machine, it can be dyeing machine, spinning machine, whatever, and we are choosing the one and which can provide us the less energy consumption and less water consumption. And when we think about the hazardous chemicals and restricted chemicals, and we are a member of the zero discharge of hazardous chemicals, and beside this, we have reached agreement for all product chemicals, and also we have restricted chemical list, and all the production units are doing the production according to the list, product by product, color by color, and receipt by receipt, believe me. And in terms of the people sources, and people are the big investment of cost every time, and that's why we are targeting to be great place to work all around the world with our every factories, because when we think about the long-term people workings are very valuable for us. Otherwise, if you have short-term working systems in terms of the people, this means that you will educate all the people again and again, and you will lose time, you will spend more time and energy. And so into social part, Coach doing lots of things to be great place to work in order to have long-term working conditions. And when we think about the product side, and Coach announced that, and we will convert all our premium quality polyester threads to recycled plastic bottle based polyester by 2024. It is very big decision, because we are the #1 sewing thread manufacturer across the world, and we are using lots of polyester. And if we convert all our virgin polyester to plastic bottle polyester, and this will give a huge service to all environments, and we are aware of this. And Coats investing now to all the product types with this approach. For example, when we want to develop something new thread, firstly we are checking is it available, it is recycled material, for example, in this material. And if it is available, we are choosing the recycled one into the bulk production usage. And all of these things can be mentioned about the reduced wastage. And in the production side, we have lots of solution threads as well. And these threads can reduce the customer problems, because we are focusing on the pain point every time as Coats into the production side, because production side means that problems, lots of problems in the washing side, in the sewing side. And according to the customer's pain point, we are developing some solution threads. And these threads are not a main thread, because all the denim industry, for example, are using coarse span threads and staple span threads. But as I mentioned before, they can also use some solution threads in some areas, and they are increasing their productivity and reducing the waste as well.
Do you know what? It's really amazing to hear that as a company, you know, you are market leaders when it comes to thread, but not only are you future-proofing yourselves and making sure that going forward, any polyester that you are going to use is going to be more like recycled based, which is amazing. And you're still looking way into the future, and obviously you've invested in like Lyocell and loads of amazing things you're doing as a company, and also the whole digital dyeing tech sort of technology that you've invested in in twine, right? So that's something that you can see a glimmer of hope, and you've definitely invested in that, because obviously the future, as we know, it might not be polyester based, it might be something else, but definitely the dyeing aspect of the threads that you use is something that a lot of people are looking into quite heavily now. And I know there's new technologies with like bacteria based dyes, and even dyes made from wood bark that you can use, and so there's many different options now that are available. And it's very exciting to see how, as a company, you guys are always every 6 or 7 months you're coming up with a new type of thread, which is quite exciting. And moving on to Stuart again, what sort of things is Coats Digital doing, especially when it comes to waste reduction?
So we're doing lots of really exciting stuff, but I think if I really focus on some of the real key stuff that we're doing from a waste reduction perspective and how we're working with brands and manufacturers to be able to achieve that, we have technologies that are around fabric optimization. So we know there are fabric optimization tools out there where we can look at, how do we place those markers? How do we create the most optimal lay plans? How do we consume fabric optimally? And that's a theoretical That's a theoretical consumption. Actually then translating it into execution on the shop floor, of course, is something very different. So then it's about actually what do you have available to you to use in those particular circumstances? What type of quality is it coming? Where are your where are your defects? What widths are you working with? And those are the types of things on the shop floor that you have to be considering right there and then. And technologies to support and help and suggest and recommend, this is what you have, this is how best to use it, is stuff that we're really working on with brands and manufacturers. So fabric optimization is one of those real key things, and again fits into this hot topic of sustainability. The other thing then is in the production environment, particularly where you're working with machine-centric environments like denim, we know that a dye vessel creates a huge amount of waste. How do we make sure that we are optimizing the output, the productivity from that? How are we maximizing the efficiency of the manufacturing process? So again, using the more traditional methodology of design, but taking that into an environment, how do we optimize all of those outputs to reduce waste? Even things like, and again, this is something that again isn't new, but bringing on board kind of going back to old school way of thinking. How do we take what we're doing today in terms of the manual methodology, how do we turn it into digital to do things like reduce your carbon footprint? Why are we shipping samples of finished goods or raw materials around the globe when that's not necessary? Why are we not doing that in a digital way? Why are we not fitting those things in a digital way? So again, nothing's new here, but it's around culturally changing what we're doing and how we're doing it against that balance of agility that we need to be able to make sure we're reacting to consumers' needs. Consumers won't wait for a very long time to get what they want to be wearing it, but also there's that process around make it once, make it well, and make it last. It's something that again isn't new, but consumers, as they're coming up, as we know, they're more conscious of the impact that the fashion industry is making on the globe. They're more conscious of the impact that the fashion industry is making on the people that are involved in the production of their garments. So all of these things collectively are what we're doing. I think certainly where I feel there's a gap from a technology perspective is I would love to see innovation around tipping in from a design perspective, throwing in those traditional patterns, consuming them, consuming those, and then producing suggestions around how to tweak those patterns to create minimal waste, which won't, I think, completely answer where Danielle is going, is working on in terms of complete zero waste, but certainly I think will aid that. So our technologies look at reducing waste from minimum of 2% up to 12% reduction in fabrics when you're using good smart tech, using traditional methodology design. But actually, how do we tip those traditional patterns that a designer would want to work with into a machine and spit out and say, actually, this is a really great alternative, which will aid that even further. That's, I think, is a gap that certainly as a technology provider we need to be looking at.
You know what's interesting? I've been seeing loads of designers now having digital avatars and letting the designers, letting the customers scan themselves in and see themselves in the garment before they even buy it. And these are there's so many things, and even with like laser technology, like companies like sort of like Levi's and that are basically investing in a point where customers can actually design their own washes, and then they have stock already available of like ready-made raw garments, so there's less wastage in the production side. So only things are made when they're needed. So there are clever ways of reducing waste if you're an existing company, and there's no right or wrong way. There's so many different ways you can do it, and it's small steps. It's those 17 SDGs as well to help you become that amazing company.
So I was just going to say that's a really key point, because what I think when we talk zero waste, I think that's a huge concept for any brand or manufacturer to take on board. It's a huge change to where they are today. I think what we need to do is break that down into practical steps that a brand or a manufacturer can take, utilizing technology and methodologies that are available now, that we're not talking future tech, we're talking available tech today. And how do we really break it down into manageable, sizable, changeable pieces that we can deliver to businesses?
Do you know what, there's so many companies who are very daunted by the prospect of sustainability still, and they are dabbling in it, doing one or two things every season. But it could be that if you've got a 40-piece or 80-piece selection maybe it's like 5 or 6 garments that you experiment doing zero waste, or you hire a Danielle or someone who's young enough and capable enough and excited enough to take that actual challenge. And like Danielle, what sort of things have you been doing with your customers? You know, you only finished a few years ago, but you've been kept very, very busy, and very, very exciting, especially looking at your Instagram. But what sort of things, what kind of stories can you tell us about some of the things that customers have been adopting?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what Stuart was saying about digitization and bringing things into the digital world really helps with, you know, heading in the right direction of that. You know, in a lot of my work, I've moved on to using Clo 3D for sampling purposes, and that way you don't have to make like, you know, 10 samples before you get it perfect, even just in like fit, and then you only do 1 fit session instead of 10. But you know, being able to make adjustments and changes on the fly and being able to see how that comes out digitally before you even have to use materials is a great way of moving forward. What I always end up saying is, you know, even it really again depends on what your priorities are, and it's better to do something well the way that you can do it instead of not doing anything because it's too intimidating. So even if we can't get to fully zero waste right away, minimal waste is definitely still something that's good to be pursued. And that can be, I find that a lot of companies I've worked with, the people who end up reaching out to me are the people who, it's not the people at the top, it's the people who are actually in the product every day, like the tech developers and the designers who are actually making it and thinking about these things are the ones that want to be changing things from the ground up. And so that's super exciting.
No, it's true, isn't it? It's like, it's the everyday people, it's the people that use, the people on the ground who are working are the ones that are more aware of these solutions. They go, I want to have a go at doing this. And yeah, it is a very daunting like subject. And you know, I meet loads of designers still who don't necessarily believe in it. You know, go, no, that's not for me at all. I'm going to carry on twirling on my stand, and I don't care. You know, the garment has to look amazing, and it can look amazing if you just slightly change your mindset and slightly reduce some of the ways that you're working, or using more sustainable trims, or thread, or interesting pattern cutting. It's just a way of just becoming a better designer for this time. And that's very important. You know, all of us have literally changed our own mindsets because of COVID, and really thought about quite carefully going, what we've been doing the last 20-30 years, it seems ridiculous. Actually, it seems like ridiculous that we've been working in this way. So definitely small steps. Like Stuart or like Hilal, anything you would like to add before I go on to the next sort of question?
Actually, Mohsin, the mindset, changing the mindset part is very crucial in zero waste approach or minimum waste. And in every time, actually, there are lots of small steps in our daily business lives. When we think about the denim manufacturers, thread selection, stitch type selection, washing type selection, fabric selection, and there are lots of different processes, and we can think about only how we can simplify them. Because another topic is simplification, I think. For example, I am understanding from the minimum waste concept, we need to simplify most of things. And when we simplify, the color selection, thread selection, fabric selection, washing selection, because we are doing lots of things onto the denim garments for fashion. And when we simplify them, we will see that minimum waste will come easily. This is my idea.
If you think back to the 70s, Halil, you know, you couldn't even buy washed garments, only like a post rinse, or, you know, so
for example,
yeah, for example, you know, everything back then was just made right, and they didn't stick things on for no reason. Everything was more practical. Obviously, fast fashion and the fact that everyone wants something to be different now is literally, you know, and the fact that even Daniel mentioned that it's cheaper to just waste the fabric than actually to spend the time and energy to not have waste. It's ridiculous. That's how cheap it's got now. And obviously there is like a flawed way of how cotton is priced, and you know, all these prices don't make any sense either half the time, of some of our raw components. But all this is changing. All this is really changing. Stuart, anything you'd like to add before I ask one of the final questions?
No, I think that's absolutely hit the nail on the head for a lot of this, and I think it's just about helping brands understand actually that a lot of the perceptions that they have when it comes to zero waste designs aren't true, and we need to support them on that process and break down taking their traditional methodologies and really helping them understand how we can make some baby steps to make that change, because it all adds up and it all makes a huge difference.
I think it's interesting, even like what Danielle's doing and other designers are doing, is they're sharing all their knowledge rather than keeping it inside and selling it to one company. It's literally this mindset of how early coders were, that, you know, I've come up with a system, I'm sharing with everyone. If you can make it better, please educate me. So it's like, you know, it's like it's that way of working, is like learning from other people, making it better, and like sharing. So it's such a fascinating sort of subject, you know. And how can, you know, Danielle, how can businesses implement zero waste right now? What can they all do? It's a very daunting subject. What should they be doing? Is it starting off small, or is it hiring someone like yourself to come in and advising them? What should they be doing?
I'd say it's a combination of both. I think it's looking at what you already have and what are the easy things that you can do right now without having to change anything, like using what you already have better. I think that that's one of the big steps. Like if you decide all of a sudden instead of using a regular nylon to go all recycled, don't throw away your old nylon, to start using the recycled nylon. You know, it's slowly making the transition, and it's not having to jump in all at one time. I think that that's one of the easiest things that you can do. Just as you need to start reordering stuff, just start reordering better things, and you know, looking at your patterns and looking at what works and what doesn't, and looking at what can change and what can't. And then when you start understanding those things for yourself, if you bring in someone that knows how to interact in a zero waste way, I think that that is really helpful to just help push along the journey.
You know what I find really interesting is when companies are very open about some of the mistakes they've made, and they go, we realize we've been working in this way and this is how we're doing it, but actually we're actively looking at changing it, and they share that journey, and it's very real. And sometimes Instagram and Facebook and all these media, you know, marketing campaigns, half of them are quite fake, and, you know, but it's always interesting when a big company and a small company actually share that journey, and the customers are along the journey with them. And, you know, that's what I find is really, it's a very interesting stage to be, because you can easily see when someone's being fake. So I don't know, because I'm involved in a lot of marketing. But yeah. Anyway, very interesting. So Halil, anything you would like to add? I think we've got a couple of questions as well, but anything you want to add before we move on?
Actually, I want to share an example from the customer for explaining how can we act in designing in our production site, for example, because as Stuart said, that not future now and today, we need to start from somewhere with small steps. A customer designed a denim garment, and they had used some wastage fabric from their warehouses, and they demanded from us our dual duty. It is, you know, that Mohsin, you know, this thread, it is polyester cotton correspond thread, but it is undyed, because the nature of cotton, you know, that looks little bit beige, little bit yellowish, and so they used undyed thread, because in this thread we are not making any dyeing, no water usage and no energy usage, only we are producing the thread and supplying to the customer. And then they selected only sustainable washes, lasering and ozone wash, and there were no any other process. And I think this is a good example for having a zero waste approach. Not zero waste, of course, but it is a minimum waste approach. I think from end to end, in every process, from especially design side, is very important for us. We need to consider all the processes, material selection and washes selection, and then some alternative usage for the customers. And you know that simplification is the best. When we think about the 1970s, the logic of denim was there was no any washing, and customers are washing the garments home weight and the denim is getting effect. With this logic, I can give another example. We are producing some indigo threads, indigo shades. You know that there are lots of different shade options in coats, in our shade cards, and we can dye it very easily, no problem. But there is also a indigo shade. In indigo shade, we are not dyeing the polyester part, only we are dyeing the cotton parts. So this means that less water and energy consumption. And when you use indigo threads, it is very similar with the fabric. It is very suitable with the fabric in terms of the appearance. And um, if you wash it, rinse, it takes effect with the fabric very similar. And if you wash it, bleach wash or lasering, and it turns very similar effect with the fabric. And it is a way of simplification in terms of the color selection, for example. Yes.
You know, obviously, your color card, was it 1,200 colors existing in your color card options?
1,200. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like, even though that's amazing, being sustainable, it's like obviously maybe, and I know you've got color cards that you make for every single thread type has got a slightly different shade of color card options that are available. Obviously, the customers can pick whatever color they like, and you guys can dye up if they meet the sort of MOQ, of course. But their ways of being sustainable is probably using the colors that are like readily available as well. I imagine it's being quite, that's one way of reducing waste, right? Rather than picking an obscure color that you guys have to dye up and gets wasted as well, I'm sure.
Yes.
So
Sure.
okay, we've got some questions. I think we might have answered some of them already. Is like where can I go for extra assistance and like sort of resources, business that sort of minimize waste? I think like Danielle has already answered that question. It's just small steps, right, guys? That's what we said, small steps. And obviously there are lots of younger designers that are like graduating who are coming through the system who are already thinking about zero waste. And there's a lot of denim-based projects that like universities are doing now. So this mindset is not a trend. It's something that's actually going to be here for a very long time. And a lot more designers in the next few years are going to be thinking pretty much like this. So it's a very exciting thing. Second question, does adopting zero waste does it really sort of like reduce waste, huge investment, altering manufacturing processes? I think Stuart and Danielle kind of touched on that. And obviously, there, as Danielle mentioned, it is a slightly longer process maybe at the beginning, but remember if you do 1 or 2 zero waste patterns of a pant, for instance, every season you might use the same fabric. Maybe the waist that Danielle or the width of the fabric might slightly change, so there might be some adaptation needed. But in the long run, you would save time and you would save money, right? Is that the correct way to say that, Danielle? If you worked in that way?
Yes, absolutely. Even just the slide that always blows people's mind is the money slide that I show of like, if you reduce your waste by even just 5%, this is like billions of dollars that are just hanging there that you're throwing away every year.
That's it.
And so even if it does require a little investment at the beginning of that time or resources to change production slightly, it's absolutely worth it, even in just a year's time.
I was just about to say, what amazes me is that we spend a huge amount of time of trying to find ways and build technology to help reduce waste because of the way we design. We're trying to fix the problem that we're creating here, and actually this is a whole concept about that we created ourselves. And what we're trying to do now is say, or not now, but bring back to the forefront of everybody's minds is actually there's a problem here that we can fix at the beginning, which means we don't have to fix it later. And that's just that, in my mind, that's what zero waste design is all about. And I think that's I think one of the things that I certainly believe in, Danielle, a question for you again is how in touch when we look at designers today and compare them against designers historically, how in touch are designers with actually the methodology of production of that garment? Do we typically, how close are we to really truly understanding what am I really working with? How do I really optimize that at the design stage? Or is there a real disassociation between the two? I'm designing to design a really great looking garment here. It has to have a particular purpose or whatever. The methodology of production is somewhat completely disassociated to that original design process. Would I be correct in saying that that gap's got bigger? And actually this is a way of being able to bring that, make that gap smaller and actually have designers really truly understanding the way that their garments produced.
Yes, absolutely. I think that there's not enough education in that side of things at all. You have to go to like specialized school and different courses to learn how to actually produce things that you design. You can make one and send it to a sample maker and you never have to deal with it again. Like you never have to look at the waste figures or even deal with it. There's one factory that I was speaking to in Scotland, I believe, that has started shipping waste that their consumers make from their, or that companies that he works for, he ships the waste back to them so they have to deal with it and start like, you know, so that they understand a little bit more of like what is actually happening with the pattern layouts and things like that. And even just that small step makes you think a little bit more and makes you understand that that actually has to go somewhere and someone has to deal with it, and it has to be absorbed by someone. So who is that going to be? And do you want to try to change that? Educating in those small steps is huge.
There's so many companies that are, you know, dealing with the waste or making tiles from the waste or for buildings, or making bricks from all of the dust and all the crap that comes from, you know, all the PP spraying and all the stone washing. So there's so many treatments and so many things that we're doing, but there are sustainable ways of doing it. You know, they do exist, and there are. That's the thing. It's like educating the product developers and the designers and the business unit people when it comes to the money side, and convincing them, going, just a small part of your collection, if you consider doing a slight bit zero waste, you'll definitely help a lot. And it just like sort of like Halil said, you know, the fact that you guys as Coats are from 2024 or 20 whatever it is, that date is that you're switching over to like recycled polyester, that will change so much of the industry just by you doing that. You know, it's quite a huge achievement, and pretty awesome, really. I sort of Amar and Sarah, any questions, or shall we wrap it up here? I think we've gone way over time.
We've had one question, so this will be the last one. So can denim ever be truly sustainable with water waste, etc.? They've kind of, that could go to anyone really.
I'll answer first, and I'm sure the other guys will answer as well. Yes, it can. There's lots of amazing ways of working now that exist. You know, companies like sort of like Tornello and like Genealogia, especially when it comes to like manufacturing the garments as well, especially with automation. You know, for me, it's all about the people that make the product as well. You know, these kind of things have been highlighted a lot in recent years, and you know, LEED certified buildings and all this. It's very important. The whole aspect of how we make our garments from the materials we use. Nearly every single aspect of it can be done with a sustainable or a circular mindset. And if you mix in zero waste in there as well, you're onto a complete winner. And I think as a company, as long as you're looking at the UN SDGs and trying to do some of them, you're doing awesome things as well. That's my answer to that. I don't know if anyone else wants to take the floor.
Yeah, I think just adding on to that, yes, and if you design something that's amazing and the customer never wants to get rid of it, that is the ultimate sustainable thing you can do. Something that lasts for their whole lifetime. That is the most sustainable denim that can be made.
Yeah, and just to add on to that as well, from a denim product perspective, one of the things that's really hot, right, which we see lots of people now starting to do, is the circular piece. It's the reworking. It's not designing from scratch. It's taking old garments, denim garments, and reworking them and making new ones. And that's a real great way of making it more sustainable.
You know, recycling is not a big thing in parts of the world. Okay, in the UK and Europe, it's very easy to find a recycling center for garments, but in some parts of the world, you just throw these garments away. So I think, you know, the whole recycling element and reusing old stock is something that we're only touching on now. And you know, and there's a whole mindset that's changing as well of how, you know, you go back 10, 15 years, people would never think about using old garments, think, oh, they're all dirty, no way. But actually, it's come into its own now. And there's, you know, the life cycle of a garment and what you can do at the end of it, whether or not it gets recycled into new fiber again, that's great. But if it can be remade again into something else, that definitely saves a lot of energy and time. Halil, any last things you'd like to say before we end off?
Actually, regarding to the last subject, having more sustainable denims, I think the specification and nomination part is very important. For example, most of time designers are designing the garment, but when we see that garment in the production units, in the vendors, and they cannot use the same materials with the same logic, with the same logic of the designers. That's why I think in the design side, specification of the all washings and material usage are very crucial. Otherwise, every vendors, every manufacturers would use whatever they want, and this means that the designer's logic would break into the production side. Lastly, I just wanted to add these things. For example, the responsible companies are very crucial, and I think should be supported more nowadays, because all the companies are investing lots of money for sustainability now, and I think it should be an output of this. Beside, for example, you gave an example from our polyester threads, and we will convert all threads to the recycled materials with the cones, for example. And we are also using some cones for winding the threads, and all of these cones are plastics. And so now we are switching these cones to the recycled polyester cones. And I just wanted to give an example for actually considering these things more into the design side as well.
Do you know what? This has been such a great discussion. I'm sure we could talk about it for another 1 hour, every single detail we talked about. I think we have to wrap it up here. Thank you so much, Halil, Danielle, and Stuart. Thank you, Amar and Sarah in the background for organizing. Thank you for me, Mohsen. It's been a great 3 episodes that we've done, and hopefully in the future you'll see some of us again. Do follow Danielle, and do find all of us on like Instagram as well, and we're all there. And and we do lots of other talks. But thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much, Coats, for allowing us to have this platform to talk about all these amazing sort of subjects. So it's a like sort of a goodbye from me, and thank you again. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Have a
guys.
great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Stay safe. Bye bye.